Mani. Apologies, everyone. I'm going to be standing and moderating this session, given I have a health injury, so please pardon me. But thank you, panelists, for joining us this afternoon. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel. It's a privilege to share stage with some of the best learning ecosystem and the HR ecosystem here. I'm sure the next 40 minutes from now, we're going to have some interesting views on how the culture is important to create consistent applied learning in a corporate. 15 years ago, we were struggling to find content. Now, content is available at our fingertips for all of us. It is important that we look at learning as a part of our day-to-day work. We have 3 generations of people at different levels in the career, which spans across 30 years. The Gen X, the Gen Y, or the millennials, and the Gen Zs. How do we think about all these personas and still make an experience of learning for them and help them advance their careers, where technology is changing almost on a daily basis? With this, I'm excited for the next 40-odd minutes with my panelists. I would like to understand our panel's perspective on, from an HR perspective, Namita, why don't you tell us your organization's learning and development strategy? How has it evolved? And what is the approach and applicability that has been there during and post the pandemic?
Yeah,
Sorry.
thanks, yeah. Yeah, so pandemic changed a number of things. First of all, maybe 2 lines. Bosch is a GCC with about 25,000 engineers in India, Bangalore. We have centers in Coimbatore, Pune as well. And therefore, we've been very much come to office, sit in the office, work from the office kind of company before. And the learning culture was no different. So learning was considered to be a time when you got off work and you could go into a conference room. You will get tea and cookies more number of times served to you. Anyone has heard that feedback before? Tea and cookies? Yes. Yes. You all feel it. So we were no different.
Right outside as well.
So we were no different as well. I think the pandemic shifted the push to learning by yourself, learning remotely, and learning what you want to learn also, rather than dishing out what is supposed to be. Of course, those who from global MNCs here will say, what happens to mandatory trainings? Yeah, all the mandatory trainings are mandatory, but I think that's a big shift. The second big thing was that I think it was a jolt to some of the learning professionals, learning career professionals, that they no longer had to, sit down and decide for everybody what they need to learn. Otherwise, we used to have departments of people planning that if you're an engineer here, then this is what you need to learn. So I think these were 2 big shifts which happened. And I think it really changed the culture of learning as well. But maybe I listen, I request the panel guys to add, and then if I have something more to say, I would add. So over to you guys.
I promise Siddharth anything difficult he's going to take. So. Siddharth, over to you. You're the learning person.
I think I concur with what you're saying as well. But I do have a different take on when the disruption in learning and development essentially started. So 2012 and 13 is when the disruption essentially started, when we had e-learning, when we had behavioral learning models coming in as well. So the organizations were now focusing a lot more on the outcomes of training, right? Now I'll take you back a little bit about how trainers and the learning professionals were. We started with a huge chip on our shoulder. We believed that we knew everything, right? And we were the center of all learning and development initiatives. So if you've noticed that most of the learning and development specialists usually come in with overarching, either paternal or maternal figures, right? So they come in to say, we know how to fix the solution. And they were at the center of all learning and development needs. So most organizations, when they used to look for these trainers and learning development professionals, they used to look at people with, huge personalities who could just speak to the room and influence them. And the shift happened in 2012 when behavioral learning models came in, and we started realizing that we're not the focus, the learner is the focus. right? So from a pedagogical approach, we started realizing that the andragogical approach is something that we need to do. Again, I think Namita was very clear on the fact that the pandemic changed it, but I believe that before the pandemic, the change essentially happened. The pandemic was just a catalyst in trying a new methodology, which is using, the online learning model. So I think that's where the change essentially happened. Back to you.
Interesting perspectives. I'm sure all of us understand that learning is now almost on fingertips and anywhere and everywhere. And we still do need the expertise, and that's why experiences count, right? So, Shanti, why don't you tell us, how do you think we are addressing learning as a cultural shift?
I think there are 2-3 things, and I can speak from what I've seen in Google. By the way, I joined about 2 years ago a fabulous organization that's known for creating great leaders. And one of the things that I noticed was learning was never mandatory. It is still never mandatory. We don't tell our Googlers that you should learn this, finish so many hours of learning, etc., etc. There are 2 things that is the fulcrum of what we do. One is we say, why should somebody learn? The key question that we want to address. And the second thing is, are we providing an enabling environment for them? When we say, why does somebody have to learn, it could be for 3 things, right? It could be because simply the person is intellectually curious, wants to learn new things. The second thing could be what's in it for them in terms of, if they get more skills, then they're going to be much sought after, they can get increases, etc., etc. The third thing is we have seen at Google that there is an innate need to share things. When we are interviewing and when we are, part of our process, our interviewing process is to look at people who have innate sense of sharing their knowledge, and we see that that comes through. So these are the 3 types of learners that we see. The second part of it is, if we want to create a culture, we also need to provide an enabling environment. And I can give you 2 examples. One is, we have this bottoms-up culture within Google, which is learning happens Googlers to Googlers. So I could, we call it G2G program. And we say, anybody could, and there are so many experts within the company. They could decide to choose to, share anything that they have learned. In fact, yesterday we had a group of campus grads who joined, and people were already asking, how do I sign up to become a coach? How do I sign up to become a, So the G2G culture is such a big part of what Google is. The second thing is managers. I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time. Just one last thing is, the managers are coached. Many of you would have read about this Project Oxygen. I don't know if it's on the internet. You can see what makes you a great manager. One of the key things in the role profiles for managers at Google is, how do you ensure that your team is enabled and it is growing and they feel like they have everything that they need to do from their job. So it becomes like an innate need for the managers to develop their teams. And just yesterday, we had a project in HR, and I said, I need somebody. I don't have the resource, but I'm looking for somebody to help me who wants to do it. And surprisingly, we can go put open jobs, and for any kind of 20% project, another thing that you would have heard within Google, and it's out there. And I said, can somebody come help me with this initiative that I'm doing within HR? And guess what? 3 applications that I got were from engineers who want to get a ringside view into what it means to be in the HR fraternity, and them wanting to learn something. And just today morning, I was interviewing one of them, and I said, what do you want to do? You're a core engineer, and what do you want to do? And they wanted a ringside view of and that's a 20% project that you'd have heard, and they are happy to do it, so we're taking it forward. So create innovative ways of how you create a pull mechanism, rather than a push saying, we have to do this, go get this 50 hours done. I have curated a learning journey for you, now go do this. Today, everybody decides what they want to do. So not even my son will listen to what I say. So that's my 2 bits.
True. Thank you.
So maybe I think, Shanti, the 2 points you made on the culture is something which resounds a lot. So time for a story. After lunch, okay for a story? Okay, no? So imagine chickens in a hen area. Can you just imagine those chickens going chick, 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 and a little bit of a hen coop? So there was this hen coop and the chickens doing chick, chick outside, and actually one silently an eagle laid an egg, with the chick eggs, and the chicks, the egg grew and became and ripe, and the chicks came out, and there comes out this little ducker-looking chick. Guess what does it do? It also does peck, 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 chick, chick. So it does that, and it continues to do and grows bigger and continues to peck, peck, peck. One fine day, when it grows a little big in size, it's like, okay, I'm a bit different from this guy around. And my neck pains when I do the chick, chick, but it didn't know what else to do. So it continues to do the peck, peck, peck. One day, an eagle flies, gives it a look and says, what the shit? Yeah, you're an eagle's chick, It says, yeah. And there it does this and it flies. So the story looks very, if you just dig a little deeper, I think the culture message is very strong here. Even if you put an eagle with chicks, they will do chick chick. So you really want to talk about learning culture, then please enable eagles to be eagles. And there's a place for everybody in this world. Everyone doesn't have to be a eagle or a tiger or whatever. Yeah? So allow the chicks to be chicks, allow the eagles to fly, but enable them. There's another very big lesson in this, which I feel very important, is simply by telling people don't pick up anything. They pick up by the culture around them, the environment, the ecosystem around them. And if everyone says, I'm not learning, and learning culture you have to do, learning culture is not going to happen. It will only happen by what is happening around them. That is why we hear so many stories about learning and transformation, which, when you ask the insider in the organization, has it really transformed? They'll do like, Yeah, that's because the change has to come from within. Yeah? And I think if this, another very important similar story in your mind would be Mowgli. Yeah? Why did Mowgli become what he was? You can make those connections, but I don't want to take all the time. But it's really interesting that learning culture will make an eagle do peck peck unless you tell the eagle and it realizes that it's not. And despite whatever you do, if you want to make a change, it has to be in the ecosystem around you. Yeah? Then the change really becomes a change. So that is very important. And I want to mention a small program which we run is, so me and a couple of my colleagues here, we are responsible for a division which takes care of global software needs and solutions. It's a global organization. So we created this program called GRASP, and in this program we avoid, as Shanti you mentioned, deciding any program which will be run. It's a low cost, there's no training. So we invite industry speakers or we get people from IIM, but the entire content is curated by the people along with us, and it is more positioned as their own self-knowledge program. There's no mandatory, no hours, no timing, no stars on your passport, absolutely nothing. There's no learning passport, nothing. If you want, you come. So the situation today is, if we don't plan for the program, we get calls, what happened, why didn't it happen? So that's the pull from the push. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting perspectives, right? How many of us over here think learning is actually a responsibility of L&D department? Great. No one is raising because.
Are you guys from the L&D department?
Great. So yeah, learning is continuous and something that is going to be on the go, and learning has evolved over a period of time. So Sid, I think question for you. You have been a trainer now for about 2 decades. So what are the challenges you see now versus 10 years back?
I think the biggest challenge is the shift, which I was talking about earlier, which is what used to happen is the trainer or the training consultant was the center of everything, right? So we walked into a room and we gave so much gyan to people. We had training programs which was 8 to 16 hours a day. At the end of it, if you ask me what the benefit was, there wasn't much, except, we wanted participants to be like us. Be like, we know everything about everything. So I think at the end of the day, there was hardly any takeaway from those programs. What's shifted, as I had earlier said, is that 2012, the disruption happened, when you had different mediums of instruction coming in. Through that disruption, what led was everything became a little more focused. So if you look at now, the pandemic has just added to that focus, saying that we are only going to focus on one skill or one behavior. We're going to have capsule learning or micro learning programs, and we're going to facilitate that learning with apps or other forums which can be used, right? So it's very focused now. No longer an organization saying that I'm going to send them out for 16 hours. At the end of it, I want them to have fun, or we want wow training. If you look at wow training, it was all reactive, right? So it's essentially about the trainer. It's about how the trainer is doing so well that at the end of it, the participant is saying, wow, did you learn anything? No. Right? So I think that's where the challenge lies. And now the beauty of right now and pandemic and the future is that it's all self-paced. If you sit down with the millennials and you give them gyan, you will not have done a good job because they have the knowledge. All they need from you essentially is where to use that knowledge and what specific area they need to target. Right? I think that's the change.
Any of my fellow panelists would like to add on?
I think it's more of the same. And I can give you an example of when I joined, we do people talks. That's a Google culture where you have people from different parts of the industry, very senior people come and speak, the who's who. And we had Vinsurf, who is the father of internet. He happens to be a Googler who was doing this session, and he was doing an APAC session. So we were all excited saying, oh, this, he's almost like, father of internet, and he's going to speak, and interesting. And we had a college grad who was interviewing him, and the humility that he had, and he's like 80 plus, 85, a very senior person, and interesting conversations where he was asking the new grad, almost a new grad, a software engineer, what he can learn from him and what are the new things that he's working on. So it is role modeling on the go for many of us who are sitting to hear from him to say, tell me you are more on the ground, learning newer things, tell me what you, so this, and the best part was he was immediately taking off, not in awe of Windsurf and saying, this is what you should do. And I think that's what it is. When leaders show that they are learning from everybody, that creates a culture. And that's what we need more organizations to do, that learning can come from everywhere.
Very true. I think being nimble and empathetic is more and more becoming the emphasis of newer leaders today, and that's kind of required as well, and that's what creates the learning culture. But no more we are dependent on somebody to come and teach us, but we do want to know what experiences can enhance and evolve it. With that, I'll pause with the panel and see if, with my questions, and ask the audience if they have any questions for the panelists. Can we have a mic, please?
Yeah. I think I can speak without a mic. Yeah, it's a so probably a question to Siddharth or for the entire person on the dais. With pandemic, people, especially in terms of the behavioral skills, behavioral learnings, with a lot of the new talent coming into the market, my question is, anybody can learn technical things over the wire. But in terms of even having to learn the skill of storytelling, having the skill of expressing things, how leaders on the dais, how can you kind of throw some light on it? How can anybody build up that skill without even talking to people? For the most part of the the last 2.5 years, with the internet challenges, with the broadband connectivity challenges, most of us were kind of advised to be on audio than on video, even on the communication channel. So how do we even build that connectivity, build that storytelling abilities? I'm a manager myself. Trust me, I've lost the entire communication skills. I was locked out for a year without a family. I even lost speaking not only my mother tongue, but also I lost my speaking abilities in English. The usual conversation what we have with people on the work culture, on the work side is quite limited. We use around 200 to 500 words instead of 1,000 to 2,000 words. So I was a great speaker myself, but I've lost the entire ability to speak. How can we overcome that particular challenge? Where is a platform to talk about that? We have Toastmasters. Again, Toastmasters is again not to talk about that. Yeah, I would like to hear more from you all. Thanks.
Firstly, I think you haven't lost the ability to speak. That was a good question. In fact, I think when you're looking at storytelling as a skill, firstly, why do you want them to be storytellers is a big question that you need to answer. Right? Do you want them to build stories so that they have not done their project work and there should be a way out? Or do you want them to inspire people to communicate better? Right? So I think that's why a lot of times when I've seen organizations coming to me and saying, we want to do storytelling because that's next skill. Essentially what you want is for them to focus on clarity in communication. You don't want them to be storytellers, right? And to talk about storytelling as a skill, how you can teach it when you have a lot of challenges technically, if you have internet available, if you have a phone available, storytelling can be taught. It's not a very difficult skill. There are only one or two aspects that you cover, and that's good enough. The rest is all practice, right? I hope that answers your question.
I just say that you must have heard of hybrid way of working, right? Everyone talks about it. But does it mean that nobody will come to office? Doesn't mean that. So I say, when you say a video way of learning or a solo, it doesn't mean that there's no program which is effective face-to-face or whatever. So in the same way, there are certain programs which need a mix. That means there'll be some techniques, as he mentioned, you will learn through audio, video, whatever. But you will have a part of it which probably works well when you take it face-to-face. See, nobody can contest the efficacy in such topics of a face-to-face communication. Yeah. So there'd be a mix. So it's not it's not from 0 to 100. The truth is somewhere in the golden mean, is what I would say. I think somebody here was raising the hand.
My question on learning part is, I have attended a lot of trainings. I seldom remember the trainer. It's what I remember most is the kind of exposure we had as a group, especially if you have an exercise to do. Many times before getting into exercise, I didn't even know what the question was. But because of the exposure we get with the brightest of the minds, and that's why we get nominated for trainings. You learn a lot. In the process, sometimes some speaker sticks to your mind for a long time, because they made a point in such a way that it just stays with you. So I always believe that exposure is the biggest learner. Many people say there is content out there, but there are a lot of junk content. A lot of people don't know which to take, and that's why I like the Google approach. Wherein you learn from each other, and that's why if you can differentiate. I interview a lot of candidates for different roles. Always you find some student from IIT to be better than a local college, even though they might be reading the same first law of thermodynamics or that particular syllabus. Why are they better? It's not that the teacher taught them better. Many times they don't even attend the class. It's because the group in which they are going around, that's where they learn the most. And so I feel learning, we have to just be an enabler. Similarly, a trainer would be an enabler, just like technology is. We are all enablers to make the environment where people can learn each other, from each other. And that's what got impacted because of pandemic, and so the learning and, in recent times I interviewed quite a bit from Indian Institute of Science students, and I interviewed quite a bit of them in the past. I see a lot of difference between the people who are studying during the pandemic versus the previous batches. The reason being there is no exposure for these students. What they learned is actually in the BTech, whatever they learned, that's all, it's there in the mind. You know, faculty is teaching online, that's not much, the attention is not there. So learning needs to be group activity, you know, it cannot be done through a training, and training is a big enabler to bring like-minded people together, and you learn a lot through them. And that's what I would say, you know, and certainly thanks for all your good points, and I certainly want to, you know, encourage group learning. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. So I don't have a question, it's more out of curiosity. You know, I haven't been in corporate for a while, I've been in consulting for some time now. And I'm trying to understand in an influencer culture and an age where I can learn from YouTube, I can learn from Instagram, I can learn from content creators, I can learn from Udemy. What is corporate really teaching its employees? What's the training that's being imparted over there? You know, because if I need to learn something, I can go anywhere on the internet now.
Which I think is true. That's the whole point that we were saying, that, you know, people curating in corporates is sparse. I mean, we have an entire people development team. And the people development team really make recommendations. Mind you, they don't say you have to do this. Of course, the only two groups that get recommendation is leaders like ourselves. We have an entire array of Google School for Leaders where we have interaction, and we believe, like this gentleman said, where we can interact with people and, you know, get to know from each other. But you're absolutely right, which is why organizations are moving away from really saying, you know, go do this, go do that, to the point that, like I was saying yesterday, we were addressing patch of new grads, 500 new grads who have joined us from the IITs and the IIScs and all of them. And the entire content, it was, mind you, their day 2. We said, you know, why don't you curate the content on how and what you want us to speak? So it was only day 2. And they were so smart that they figured out what they wanted to hear, what questions they had for us. It was almost, we were getting grilled by them on what makes sense for them. So I think it has to be more pull than push. Absolutely agree with you. That's why we don't even attempt to go and be the holier than thou, that we know everything, we'll tell you what to do. It is learning from each other.
Yeah, just to add, I think that's the example I gave of the training program in the corporate called Grasp, where it's a pull and not a push. So it's no two people are saying, okay, now I'll decide the content and here is the program and please come and attend. That doesn't work. And to answer you a little bit, I think you touched a bit of a raw nerve of a study we did in-house. What do you really want to teach in a corporate? So I'll answer you this way. Please don't take training as only for technical people or engineers. You know, in a corporate, to make it successful, there are finance guys, there are supply chain guys, there are logistics, there is HR themselves. By the way, how many people from HR here? Many, no? Okay. All of you have a learning and training program for HR itself? You have? Good. So my answer to you was that we had to, you know, get industry exposure for people who serve long in the organization on business models, on what are the changing methodologies by which a supply chain, you know, transformation is happening. And these are the subjects on which we arrange cross-pollination with the industry, and people come and share their business case, their experience, and how they, you know, kind of made solutions. And that's what gets people into the discussion rooms, and not a YouTube video on any of the subjects. So those are the kind of topics which corporate is looking at, and trying to make the people also open their minds, like if you're working in this direction, so is there possible to look wider, sideways, and what's different, and how can you adopt e-commerce? And those are the topics on which we encourage discussions in the corporate side. Yeah.
Okay, just an observation, sir. I'm sure you're above 40, right? Okay, and ma'am, you are below 30?
That's
Yeah,
very,
I mean, it's a difficult question, but yeah, we're okay. But you see the difference in the way that they're approaching training? The gentleman said that he learns with groups, right? And the younger generation is saying that, no, we like Udemy. And I think that's what the change or the shift that's happening in the training industry, which is that we are also catering to that population, which is not so obsessed about sitting in groups and learning. They would rather have a self-paced learning, but they want something extremely specific. So that generation is someone who goes to a buffet and says, no, I want to order a la carte. I'm not going to have whatever is available. I think that's why we are in a fix, if you look at it as a training industry.
Yeah, I think exposure to different things and having to learn anywhere and everywhere and each one being a little different does make a difference, and each one has their own way of learning. Some would prefer groups, some would prefer self-learning, some would prefer video learning, some might prefer micro-learning. So each one has a choice and each one of us are different. We just have to choose our path. What really helps us is the experiences and the exposure that comes with it while we have those discussions, and things like graphs or the Googler Meet do add to it. Before I take the next question from the audience, I think one question, Namita, which comes to my mind is that, how do we create accountability for self-learning? A lot of us are talking about self-learning, but how do we really create that accountability?
asking me the question because we argued on it before the panel, okay? So that's the secret. Yeah. Do your organizations have points for learning and you give some stars and collect it? No? Anybody has promotion connected to doing certain courses? There are. Don't say no. There are companies doing that. Yeah. So in my view, there's a line from Nike as I was reading for this panel. So I really, Googled to learn it. So Nike says, don't fake it if you don't have it. So learning, you will learn when you want to learn. Whether it's a millennial out there or teaching tricks to an old dog, it won't work. When you want to learn and there's an imperative to learn, it will come from inside. So incentivizing anything will work only for a very small period of time, and it will really not work after that. If at all, that even for that small, it works. So my answer is that, accountability is with the person who wants to learn. No one else can be accountable for your learning. So if your L&D says, I will map your career, I will make you go up the ladder, come on. Nobody can make anybody go through the ladder or up or down or whatever it may be. So please understand that there's a very beautiful, thought here. I mean, if you are really wanting to be somebody who continuously learns, who continuously develops and gets salary increases, right? You want to get. So maybe just help me with the mic for a second. So, you see this word here, right? It says learn, isn't it? You can see that or it's not visible? So if you just do this, what happens? That's all. You will learn. You will. But you need to keep on learning as you grow, and the accountability cannot be shifted because the earning is yours, not Shanti's. Yeah. Over to you.
Thank you, Namita. I think there was a question from the audience. Why don't you take that? Sure.
I would like to know from all of you, I'm Pratima Kapuabe, I head the talent management in R&D. So I would like to know what are the challenges you are facing, especially in Google, DMC, and as a L&D, from a today's learner point of view, where we are managing with different generations of learners. So what are the major top 2 challenges which you are facing, and how are you addressing it in terms of measurement, in terms of definition? Thank you. Was I audible for the? Thank you.
Okay, for our audience that are live, I think the question was that how do we measure learners for different generations? What are the challenges?
And how they're measuring it or defining it to overcome the challenge.
The challenge that we face at Google is highly aspirational talent that we have. I'm saying that with a lot of modesty, um, because every time, we address a town hall, or when we have managers, forums, and so on and so forth, every time the question is, what can I do next? What more should I be doing? Um, which is the example I gave today, that when I posted a requirement on my team for a 20% project, there are people outside. I thought somebody in HR might apply somewhere in the region, but I had engineers applying for it. So the challenge today is, how do we continuously keep the intellectual curiosity? How do we fulfill that need? And how do we, I don't know whether we really get down to measuring, but I would say one of the things that we have within, and it's part of culture building, is that when we do our annual performance cycle, one of the things that you get measured on is, what do you contribute to Google? It makes people think that it is not always, I get this from my manager, I get this salary increase, I get this promo. I tell you, that is also a big aspirational talent that we have. That's a problem we face. But we ask this pointed question, how do you contribute to Google? When we say, how do you contribute to Google, it could be you're a G2G coach. It could be you were on Google Serve. It could be I did this 20% project. It could be I helped my colleague with this. It could be anything that sets the mind, that has such a ripple effect that everybody wants to do something. So I would say the challenge, only one challenge, I know you said top two, but the one challenge that is top of my mind as I look at Google Cloud and how I'm building out the people strategy for us here is, how do we quench the intellectual curiosities of such brilliant minds?
Thank you. I know there were more questions. We are running short on time, so the panelists are going to be around. You can ask your questions offline. For now, I would go towards my panelists for any closing comments. I'll start with Namita. Okay, Siddharth.
Keep learning. I think growth has to be something that is your own self-paced growth, something that you want to do, and we'll always be there to evolve as your learning partners. I think that's our job, essentially, right? Okay.
I don't want to sound preachy, but one of the personal things that I have done is keeping a catalog by my bedside. And what I do in the morning, I know many of you have heard about gratitude diaries, which I do follow. But another thing that I keep on mind is, what did I learn and whom did I learn from? I do that very often. And if you can do that, then it just helps you reflect.
My note would be that each organization's reality is different. So you can't fit one experience onto another. Half the problem is solved when you really know what is the right problem. So for us, for example, finding the right problem and addressing it in the best possible way is that which gave us results, versus having a set of answers and fitting it on whatever question is asked. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So basically, keep learning, be curious, be more empathetic, and have gratitude. There is no single direction here. We experiment, we adopt, we fail fast. The philosophy: relearn, learn, and apply again. And the cycle continues. What worked today will not work tomorrow. So reinvention and methods to make this work is what we all leave you with. It's important to measure the success consistently and make changes to the plan. It was great talking to all of you today, fascinating inputs, and thank you for your participation to the good participants as well as the panelists. Thank you for joining us. I hope we have left you with some new learnings today. Thank you.